Happy New Year to everyone. Very glad to see everybody coming back. I know one of our classmates has some medical situation, so let's wish her recovery quickly. Okay, today we are going to cover two very important areas. One is on the advocacy, right? I mean, we have learned this air quality and the impact to us. And so I think many people say, like, what can we do? So we are going to, today we are very happy to have Annie Beaman to talk about community advocacy. And as you can see here, we have two logos here, and Annie is the executive director of Our Children's Earth, and is also a local nonprofit organization. And Annie also attended our first ambassador training. So so she's ambassador, and also now after the training, and she also became an instructor to us. So with that, I will pass it to Annie.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much. It's good to be back. I'm a huge fan of this program. When I first saw they were doing it, I called Ken, and that's how I first met Ken, to learn about the program, and I was in the first year students. I'm a huge fan. I learned a lot, and very happy to now contribute by talking about advocacy. I'm a professional environmental advocate, and I came to this work after sort of starting as someone who is concerned about environmental issues and public health issues, and sort of an activist. Like, I would show up to protests and things like that, but I was getting very frustrated that nothing was changing. So decided to go to law school so I could figure out how to navigate the systems that kind of dictate outcomes a lot of times for our local environmental health. I moved to Vallejo in 2013. I love Vallejo. There's much to do here, unfortunately, in terms of environmental health. My organization, we do have some local projects, but we're small, but we also work nationally. So I have actually more experience kind of out of state. We work a lot in the deep south and southeast region, some in New York, some in California. So we sort of get around. And our three core programs are environmental advocacy and enforcement, primarily through federal lawsuits. So we have a lot of lawyers who do all kinds of lawsuits, from administrative and Clean Air Act cases, which I'll discuss a little bit later, to like Clean Water, Endangered Species Act, all kinds of things, often in the federal courts, sometimes in state court as well. We also fund and support documentary films about environmental issues. That's another big program that we have. And it's sort of how we achieve our education aspect of our mission as a small org. We figure more people will see big documentaries than we can reach on a personal level. And then more recently, we're also supporting scientific research through giving grants and field support to people that are studying, especially like marine megafauna. So that's cool, because we get to do like scuba diving and snorkeling with manta rays and stuff. And that's just an overview of kind of what I'm going to talk about. The first part of my presentation, I'm going to go through governmental roles and the authority structure that, like I said, sort of often dictate clean air, community health outcomes. Some of the major laws that apply in this arena. And then for the break, we'll talk about more like advocacy campaigns and strategies, and more like kind of brainstorming around what works and what doesn't. I don't know if he did it this year, but I remember Dr. Spada's presentation.
Yes.
Had a quote about the history of air monitoring, right? Yeah. And so I put this in also as a way to remind myself to acknowledge that the legal system that we have is completely inadequate, but it is what we have. I'm going to be talking about it today as like the structure that we have available to us, not as like the ideal. Our legal structure in the United States has some roots in the Roman Empire. This is the first written document that I'm aware of that discusses basically resources, natural resources that should be held in public trust. Some of you may have heard of this concept of the tragedy of the commons, where we all need access to a certain resource so that it has to be managed in a way that can benefit everyone, so everyone gets equal access. This is an ideal, not usually something that is achieved, but this is, a very old Justinian Roman Empire era statement about that everyone needs air, clean air, clean water. They included the shores of the seas too, as like everyone needs to fish to survive, especially in that society. So this is a kernel that still exists in like the American legal system. These things are slow to change and very much rooted in history. So yeah, jumping right into like Civics 101. Everyone will have had like a middle school class or something where you talk about the 3 branches of government. Things are a little crazy right now at the federal level especially, but these were created to like check and balance each other, right? Like they have their individual roles, but then they also interact. For our purposes, I listed some of the like relevant entities for community advocacy and clean air issues. The executive branch, of course, has the president, the governor, the mayor, the like head of that, whatever that level of government is. It also has all of the agencies. So this is the Bay Area Air District, US EPA, also attorneys general and the Department of Justice. So these are like the people's lawyers who will sometimes intervene, even at the community level, environmental issues. We've experienced that here in Vallejo, actually. I'll talk about that later. Legislative, they make the laws, they control money, budgets, also very relevant sometimes to community health outcomes. So that would include like the city council, the California Senate and Assembly and Congress, and then of course the courts that enforce the laws and make sure that whatever the other 2 branches are doing or anyone else doesn't violate statutes or common law, anything like that. Okay, and then another Government 101, we have something in our Constitution called the Supremacy Clause, and that means that federal law is supreme. States can't pass a law that violates federal law. That would be unconstitutional. I also look at federal law from an environmental perspective as like the floor. It's the most basic environmental rules and laws apply everywhere throughout the United States. States can go above and beyond. There are some exceptions to that, but generally speaking, federal law is the floor. It applies everywhere. States can do more to protect public health. California has some stricter emission standards than the rest of the country, for example, but they can't do less. And that also applies to district and local areas. So you can build upon what happens at the federal level, but you can never go below. So here I listed like a bunch of the different entities that are involved with all of that. Depending on the campaign that you're working on, the type of advocacy you're trying to do, you can cross paths with any number of these agencies, from like public health, city council, the district level, or higher. You might be doing something with the California Air Resources Board at the state level. So all of these can come into play depending on the issue. And they all have different roles, right? So like the US EPA is not gonna come in here and check our air sensors like almost ever, but the Bay Area Air District will, because they're more community level. So they all kind of function differently, but hopefully in partnership. Yeah, so then just jumping right in, from that same perspective of like starting local and then zooming out to federal. AB 617 is relatively new by like slow legal's timeline standards, passed in 2017. Vallejo's technically not one of the AB 617 communities yet. I listed some of the current communities down here that are like known and well established. There are a lot of community advocates there who have been saying for decades like there's too much pollution here and not enough happening for our communities. These are environmental justice communities, which Jasmine will go more into environmental justice as a topic after lunch. But these are areas where there are lower income communities, a lot of people of color, which the racial demographics of a community is the number one factor that determines if and how much polluting industry is cited there. It's not even about poor communities, it's about racial demographics. That's the number one factor. So they passed this law recognizing that a lot of these communities are underserved and have been for generations. And AB 617 is like a tool to unlock funding and programs for these kinds of communities. Vallejo, Rodeo, and Crockett are all in the mix. The Bay Area Air District calls them consistently nominated. So we're getting some like funding, some projects, it's just happening slowly. There's a process, I think I have a slide. So this is the process for getting like formally into the program. Ken, maybe you can explain more how this goes from your insider perspective? Because I know we're in the mix. I know that Vallejo and Rodeo are consistently nominated by the actual Air District. Crockett is consistently nominated by the Air District and members of the community that are always calling and raising hell, because there's a lot of like people like that in Crockett who are very activist. So yeah, I'm not sure like what the next steps are or what kind of timeline we can anticipate, but maybe you can speak to that.
Yes, okay. One of the reasons we have this kind of a training is actually prepare ourselves to be an AB 617 community. What do we get from the AB 617 community? Basically, we got more resource and attention from the Air District level. But if you look at, for example, currently we have AB 617 in Oakland. We have two actually there. And then we have one in Richmond and one in Baby Hunter Point. But for example, I went to some of their meeting, and you can see there are many community members actively involved. Because, for example, like there are different committees for if we are going to have an AB 617, if we are going to become one, then there's a lot of work needs to be done, and we need people who have the interest and knowledge to work on this. So that is part of the reason why I kind of encourage the education part and get people to involved in this process. And so basically, okay, the money is coming from the carbon tax, and so a lot of time the revenue is not fixed. And yes.
What's the carbon tax?
Carbon tax is one way which, okay, so basically we're talking about a lot of greenhouse gas get emitted into the air and affect the environment for the earth. Okay, so one of the idea of carbon tax is, okay, we are going to charge people if you emit like greenhouse gas. And
Usually
then
big companies,
yeah,
like they pay to belch carbon into the atmosphere. They pay the state.
and then because of that carbon tax movement, a lot of the communities say, okay, if they pay money to you and they can emit greenhouse gas in my community, we don't agree with that. Okay, so, and actually that's how AB 617 come into place, which they say, okay, we are going to also make sure the local community does not get adversely impacted by this carbon tax. That's why the funding is coming out from the carbon tax thing in California. And so I don't know how often, but very often, I mean, every year or every couple of years, they have an auction of carbon tax credit or something. And then basically the state takes some money out from that auction and give it to this AB 617 program. So first of all, it's like there's not unlimited funding, so they have to pick which community is going to get attention. And also, like I went to some of their meeting, and like the Bay Area Air District also have to provide a lot of staff support for if for example like in Richmond, there's a lot of meetings the air district has to support them to do things. So that's why the process is the air district is going to nominate, and the CARB, California Air Resource Board, which is on the state level, is going to decide which community is going to be included as AB6MD community. So that's the
That's the
last
process.
story.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, and that's partly why I mentioned that Vallejo and Rodeo don't have community members consistently nominating their own communities. It's related to this history of activism that like Richmond and Oakland, they've got it, right? But like up here, we don't really have such a strong history of community organizing and activism as a group or as a city. So that's part of the reason why we're lagging behind, even though we face a lot of the same, or even in some cases worse, public health burdens than some of the communities that are already in the mix. So we're getting there, but like that's could be like one easy thing to do, maybe even related to like the project phase of the ambassador program, is like getting people to nominate your city for these extra resources, like figuring out like what's the process for nominating to the Bay Area Air District and just doing it, because that kind of thing can make a difference. So, but like I said, they're already doing it in Crockett.
Annie, sorry,
Yeah.
what do the colors represent on that map?
Oh, I think this is a screenshot from Cal Enviro screen. So I don't have the layers here, and this is from last year, so I'm basing on memory. But I think this is like overall pollution burden. The Cal Enviro screen has a bunch of different layers you can choose. Some are just like health outcomes. Some are like demographic data or income levels. But then you can also look at like total health burden. So like here you can see that South and West Vallejo have higher pollutions than East, like over by Glen Cove, down in Rodeo. All these areas around the Carquinez Strait have heavy pollution burdens, and which means I can't remember if it's a high or low score on the Cal Enviro screen, but it's one of the like state's ways of quantifying which communities are heavily burdened.
I go into that one now in my presentation.
Right.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
If I might say that when you look at asthma burden, for like hospitalizations, South Vallejo has like 99 and 100th percentile
Super
in
high,
asthma
yeah.
burden. That's compared to the rest of the state, so it's basically pretty much over the top. And then you look over near Sacramento, Stockton and stuff. That's a lot of a lot of Latino people, a lot of farm workers, and spraying pesticides on people's heads and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, different sources, and depending on the season, we sometimes get the air coming from there. But yeah, heavy burdens in both places.
Does 99% mean like 99% of the people have?
No, that means that out of 100 people, every 100 people, you're the most likely person to have asthma. And if you're 0 or 1, that means that you live in like a pristine area, like the best part of Marin County or something like that.
It's like among the highest in the state. It's compared with the rest of the state, it's not 99% of the population. But I think Vallejo has 3 times higher
Yes.
asthma than
State average.
state average.
State
So,
average.
Yeah,
The South Vallejo is 3 times the state average.
so that's AB 617. It's kind of early days for it, but that's where the funding is coming for some programs that already exist here in Vallejo, also in Rodeo and Crockett, around like mobile air monitoring, and there's going to be more in the future. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make another explain this the importance of AB 617. I don't know if you want to cover that.
No, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, it's before AB 617 or before 2017. The air district's focus is what they call ambient air, which is like the big area air quality. And for example, like if you look at Vallejo and the Crockett, we only have one monitor in Vallejo. Basically, that is one monitor the whole area. So that's what, before the AB 617, the Bay Area air district's focus is on regional air quality, or the terminology is ambient air. So only we got attention, we means the community level, we got attention after this AB 617 got passed. And basically this says we need to pay attention to the community level air quality. So before this passed, we complained to air district about air quality, and there's basically no response because
We're not important.
yes, before
Yes.
okay,
Right.
okay. The what happened is air district was established to enforce the Clean Air Act. The Clean Air Act. So
I
basically,
am gonna talk about that.
oh yeah.
later,
So basically, going through the law basically determining where the resource and attention is going to go. So yeah.
Right. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying about federal laws, the floor. Like it starts really big and then slowly zooms into the community level. And like from the Bay Area Air District's perspective, like, yeah, maybe overall air quality in the Bay Area is fine compared to like LA or Stockton or wherever. But like there are major differences between like here and there and Vallejo and, you know, Silicon Valley. So that's why the community level programs really matter. And this is why also AB 617 is focused on community air monitoring plans, like community level that are informed by people who live here. So we can tell them like, this is the neighborhood that's most polluted, like everybody's sick there and that it smells bad there, you know, all of this community level wisdom that needs to be.
The community doesn't really get this information.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's kind of new. So,
But as it grows, the community doesn't know about, we have the worst air quality.
Right.
We need to do something about it, or, you know, we don't know that if we don't come to class or if people don't tell us.
and if nobody's doing monitoring.
Right,
either.
we just sit there and get sicker and
Right.
sicker and sicker.
Right.
Because we don't have knowledge of what's going on.
We need
That's why
data.
she states we need.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is also one of the, this is a great leading to your passion project. So now, as you say, like before you come into here, you didn't know about it.
Nothing.
So now you know about it, and so we wanted to work with you and to see how we can kind
Get it
of
out
make more people
Right.
understand it, so we can work together to change the situation.
Right.
Yeah, totally. So zooming back to the state level, and this is really relevant this law is relevant when you want to like engage with a specific project that's happening in your community. CEQA is the California Environmental Quality Act. It's the legal, it's the statute and the legal process that determines like how a potentially polluting development, business, corporation, how they have to go about mitigating their impacts, disclosing their impacts to the public in the first place, and then getting permits so we can monitor and manage the pollution that's coming out of the facility. This applies to refineries, it applies to government projects, housing, although that's changing, which I'll talk about later. It's like the public environmental review of any project. So here in Vallejo, we've come up against CEQA like with the ORSEM project, and more recently with California Forever. All of these kinds of new developments, or even if there's an existing facility that's changing or expanding their operations, they have to go through CEQA. And that's how we determine which permits they need, which impacts they're gonna have to our community. And CEQA has built in a bunch of different opportunities for public input and comment. These are formal public input and comment phases. They're like strict deadlines. And then there are also requirements. The agencies have to consider and respond to the comments they receive. In some cases, they might receive like 4 comments, right? In others, it can be like 800. So it really matters, like community involvement really does matter in the CEQA process, and it often changes outcomes. So it's not, and it's like it can be hard to engage with, it can be hard to like find the initial notification that the CEQA process has been triggered. which is why you need like community organizations like Citizen Air Monitoring Network, Rodeo Citizens Association, to let people know like, hey, something's happening and there's an opportunity to provide your input.
If I might add.
Yeah.
You know, when a project comes up, oftentimes we're lucky even to find out that the company's done the environmental impact report that the agencies like the Air District or the county require. And so sometimes we even have to organize to have them extend those comment periods. Sometimes they're like really, really short, like a month, half a month sometimes. You know, so, and usually the environmental impact report is the first time you actually have a clue about what the project's really about that you can even comment about. And then you have to maybe do a huge amount of research to find out why something about the project might be dangerous to the community. So it's a real kind of, often the catcher's catch can kind of situation.
Yeah, it's much better, and I have this perfect segue to this slide. It's much better to get involved early as possible. Scoping is the first step. First, the entity that's applying for a permit that is subject to CEQA review will reach out to the agencies that might have an interest. So it might be a public health agency, the air district, a water board, whatever it is. All of those agencies, they're going to reach out to them, and then there will be identified a lead agency that is kind of like the clearinghouse for all of the CEQA information, and that's where you're going to find the documents. But there's no like single CEQA place that you can just monitor everything. You have to check your local agencies. Yeah.
It would seem like, okay, these agencies, these, whatever, they would send out information to the community.
Yeah, they have to publish it,
Yeah,
but they publish it like in a newspaper
no,
or like at the library in the basement.
no, everybody don't get that. They need to
Exactly.
send it to the people, and to the community.
So no one's getting
No one's getting it.
That
That's
would be
bad.
that would be a good reform to CEQA
Yeah.
is requiring.
No one
like,
thinks about the community enough
well,
to do that,
yeah.
but some people do.
That's why you state we need people in Vallejo that's
You need
interested,
watchdog
watchdogs
organizations.
and coming together.
Yeah, who are like looking out for this. I mean, sometimes you hear, I was talking with Daphne and some people in Rodeo earlier this year about, or last year I guess, it's 2026 now, about like they heard a gas station was gonna go in on this certain corner. And it's just talk in the neighborhood, right? Like there might be a sign somewhere, but that's like your first indication, like look this up because the permitting process may have already started. And you wanna get involved early. And if you don't know how to, like call Ken, call me, I have my contact information at the end. Someone who like has experience looking this kind of thing up and like, usually, I mean, oftentimes you can find it by like Googling around, but it can be challenging to find the information, especially at the scoping stage, because this might just be a little notice on the website and they all publish the notice in different ways. Most people are not looking at the places where these notices are being published. So.
Yeah, I wanted to say, like in the Orson case,
I'm going into that later too.
oh, okay, then,
Yeah.
here,
I have a slide on that, on how that played out, because like, I just wanted to like give you an basic orientation with this process. So yes, the environmental impact report is kind of the like core of CEQA. That's the document that contains everything. It lists out all the anticipated impacts to air, water, noise, like all kinds of different impacts that these projects could have that would be relevant to the communities that they're being cited in. That's all, it's identified during scoping in the draft EIR. And during both of those phases, there are opportunities for community members to say like, hey, this is inadequate because you didn't include all the noise and traffic impacts that it's gonna have to my neighborhood. And so a lot of times you can get those included in the EIR and it makes a difference. But yeah, once the draft EIR is published, that's usually when people find out about what's going on, like a big project happening. And we've seen that in all of our communities. So sometimes there will be a big uproar, public review and comment of the draft EIR. It's not final yet. And if there's a bunch of opposition and the agency's like, oh, we have to take these comments seriously, they have a good point, this draft EIR is inadequate, you have to redo it. a lot of projects will stop there if there's effective community opposition. And I have this little zombie because they can always come back. Like you never know. They might say like we're putting it on hold. They might not say anything. You just have to keep watching because they can come back. They can always respond to the comments and then restart the permitting process.
There's nothing that you can download on your phone or that information keeps coming to you about stuff like that or nothing.
On individual campaigns, yes.
Oh, I mean,
So like, is this next one? There's the Orsum. I'll just skip ahead to this one because for like California Forever, which is a live issue now here, you can sign up for updates from, I got this from the Solano Together website.
Mhm.
So if you go to that website and sign up for their mailing list, they'll email you when something's happening with
What
the
is it?
EIR. Solano Together is the campaign that's like watchdogging this issue. A bunch of other organizations are too, but unfortunately, at least I'm not aware of like a single place you can sign up for all notifications. You could probably do it from individual agencies. In Contra Costa County, the public health department is very much in play with some of these issues. But you kind of have to do it on a case-by-case basis, unfortunately.
There is a Facebook group for the Forever California
Yeah,
where they talk about quite a lot of things.
right. Yeah, there's a bunch of individuals that are engaged with that for and against.
Yes.
So, yeah,
So you get the whole conversation.
yeah, totally.
You know what? This is so embarrassing. I'm a part of the Solano Together because they've come through our church and I get the emails continuously. I've attended a couple of them, and then you know when they hit where they're meeting at in different places, and I just dropped it. Or I have to be more attentive to something like that.
I'm going to talk about that later too, because like that happens a lot. Like with these advocacy campaigns, like you can't just dedicate 5 hours a week forever and ever to a project that like comes and goes. So yeah, and right now that project's in flux anyway. They're switching over to a new strategy with Sassoon City. So yeah, take a break, forgive yourself. It's okay.
Yeah.
So this is just an example of CEQA in action. One of the Martinez refineries retrofitted to a biodiesel refinery. I think it's the biggest one in the world.
The
still.
second,
Second. It's
Phillips
P-
66.
It's
is
the biggest?
first,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're close, but
So this has happened with P66 too. They had to, because it was an existing refinery, right? But they're retrofitting it to do something different. So they had to go through the whole CEQA process again. They had to get new permits. They had to discuss how this new fuel was going to impact the surrounding communities differently. They're bringing in animal fats, vegetable oils, and stuff like that to refine instead of crude oil. So it changed. And that triggers this whole process, this whole CEQA permitting process, all the public input opportunities.
So it's better now.
Well, it's biodiesel, so
It's better.
in some ways it's better. Yeah. In
Yeah.
some ways, I mean, it's better in terms of the climate impacts,
Okay.
I suppose.
if I might comment, that'll be probably like $1.5 billion every single year to pay for a lot, at least half or whatever will be like soybean oil and stuff. So the price of soybean oil has gone way up, and they're being given a whole bunch of money because they say that it's low carbon, for using soybean oil for diesel fuel. And so the question is it really low carbon? Well, it's not really low carbon because it's actually harder to make diesel out of
It's a little bit
soybean oil than
greenwash.
it is from tar sand. So it's really a very expensive project to do. And so the state and the company's saying, oh, this is like low carbon, and they're giving all this money for it, but it's really questionable because it's not really low carbon. So there's kind of these other questions that are arising about
Different words get more money.
the financials of it is not really accurate.
Right.
The community health impacts are different too. So it's not petrochemicals as much that's getting into our lungs and our communal air, but the odors and the noise from bringing in and refining animal fats, for example, that's an entirely different nuisance to the surrounding communities. And we're all downwind of that air, so it still affects us.
What is tar saying?
Oh, that's the dirtiest crude oil on the planet. It comes from like kind of almost like a solid
It's like a slurry
tarry
with oil.
residue that you can't even run through a pipe. You have to actually heat it to be able to run through a pipe. So it's basically it's not like like you don't get a gusher from it. You have to dig it out of the ground.
Just hard to access oil.
So it's worse
Yeah,
for us.
It's got way more carbon.
it's worse for the
Particle.
whole globe, for the climate system.
Oh my.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So this is back to that timeline of like the CEQA process. This is the Orsum situation that happened a long time ago in Vallejo, but it's sort of like our legendary campaign because the community really rose up and stopped it. And there were all kinds of irregularities with like the way the city council was accepting bribes basically around this project. So this is one where it stopped at the draft EIR phase. Like the community didn't know about it right away, but once the advocacy, Fresh Air Vallejo, kind of grew out of this, the community advocacy started. They got 771 pages worth of individual comments on the draft EIR. That's like a big turnout for a community of this size. And also the state attorney general stepped in and wrote a letter saying like there are all kinds of irregularities with this project. It's going to impact the community negatively. And so all that pressure, also agency input from a bunch of other local agencies, all of that kind of came together to like call out the complete BS in the project, both with the irregularities and the way they were pursuing authorizations locally, but then also just like the environmental impact report was inadequate. So that kind of pressure is enough to be like, just get out of here. You're not doing this project here. It's not good enough. So this process does work, and we saw that with Orsum. Do you want to add to that, Ken?
Actually, wanted to address to like how do we find out? Actually, it was one of our citizens went to a city council meeting and heard about that, and then he find out there's a draft, there's a EIR or CEQA process with a couple hundred page of documentation. So she is the one actually organized the people as a study group. So basically we say, okay, you read this part and you read this part because it's just too huge a document and a lot of them are very technical. So it's kind of very hard. So as you say, like a lot of time people don't realize this is happening, and even for the Orson project, at the end we kind of stopped that, but it's at the very beginning. It's like nobody is even paying attention.
Yeah, you have to just like be at the right meeting, check the website, happen to see the notification they're publishing, like in the San Jose Mercury or the Mercury News or whatever. And it's often like random that someone actually sees it or happens to be at the meeting where they're first discussing it. In that case, in the case of Orsum, the city of Vallejo was the lead agency. In other situations that affect us, it might be like a different county's health department. So you're not going to always get the information you need to get from the city council. It depends on who the lead agency is.
Sort of answers the question. They can publish in San Jose about something in Vallejo?
No, like they have to publish it, and different agencies do it differently. Like they've determined how their residents or how the residents that will be impacted will best be reached, and often it's like kind of old-fashioned, like in a newspaper.
But there's a contrast of times, why not do it in that?
They might. Some
Okay.
agencies may do it in there. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I don't know the specifics of what each agency does. It depends on the agency, but like that in itself is the problem. Is a problem that there's not a single place you can go check and like select your zip code and then look for all of the published notices. It's all different places. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know all the details about the Orsum situation, but from what I gather, they're basically going to be taking like metal slag from steel making and stuff like that, like all these particles and ship it in and then make a big huge pile down near the wharf, right along, the Napa River next to the community, and the pile was going to go way high up, and so the company said, "Oh, there's really no problem. It wasn't like contained within some kind of building or something like that." And so, the winds get pretty strong over there. So, a scientist in the community who's been, who's a brilliant person who's been involved in a lot of this over the years, in the whole area, used to live in Crockett, then Vallejo, and now he's in Susan City. But he was able to determine that the data was like inaccurate. That they said that they were saying that the particles were not going to be blowing into the community, and he was able to prove that au contraire, that they are going to be blowing into the community, and he used his scientific understanding to be able to kind of project that into a comment in the EIR that I think was part of the very important evidence to say that the project was going to be harmful to an environmental justice community.
Is that why they just take junk and bring it to the community and let the wind blow it into the community?
Well, that's a general principle. All these industrial projects they're not around rich people.
Of course.
They're around working class people, poor people, people
And that's
color
not,
and everything.
that shouldn't happen. Period.
That
It
always
shouldn't
happens.
happen.
And the county and
Can
the
I,
city.
can I jump in? Because I wanted to talk about like the differences in the way people navigate CEQA. Like, I mentioned here that more than 50% of CEQA actions and lawsuits are filed by organizations or individuals that have no environmental track record. It's rich people who are hiring lawyers, rich people who live in rich neighborhoods that are hiring lawyers and experts because all this is expensive. You don't always have someone in the community who's a scientist or an engineer able to do wind modeling and say, like, if you stack up metal dust over there to make cement out of, it's going to impact the community in XYZ ways. Oftentimes you have to hire people. So that's the good reason why we've seen some CEQA reform this year. It's like a give and take, but the new laws make it much easier to do housing developments because obviously we have a housing affordability crisis, especially in the Bay Area. So what they've done is like clear the way so a lot of those projects won't have to go through this process because rich people were suing to stop it all the time. NIMBY is an acronym that means not in my backyard. It's these neighborhood associations, wealthy people who are like, yeah, apartment buildings are great, wind farms are great, but I don't want to see it from my mansion on the hill. So do it somewhere else, not in my backyard, somewhere else. In a community where nobody's going to be able to like resist, basically, because people are too busy working or they, have other issues. So that's what NIMBY is, and then YIMBY is yes in my backyard. That's sort of this counter movement that's happening now to try to clear the way for more, especially housing development. There are give and takes for this. Like there might be environmental impacts, there might be traffic impacts from building new housing that they're not going to have to look at now because of these new reforms. So, and that's a price that we're sort of agreeing to pay through the state legislation that our representatives passed, right? That's a price we're agreeing to pay for more housing, for more affordable, accessible housing. But like it is a give and take. And like Charlie was alluding to, there's a huge imbalance with who engages with CEQA and how effectively they're able to engage with CEQA. So, I mean, it's been wonderful to see in our communities that it's actually working for us with like the California Forever project, with the Orson project. It can happen, it just like takes a lot. Especially when you don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to hire lawyers and experts. So that's kind of what I wanted to conclude on CEQA. There's much more to say on it. It comes up a lot. And I'll breeze through the federal law. Ken referenced it earlier. This is like the basis for all of our clean air regulations and rules at all levels. It was passed in the 70s. It's a great law. It's like I said, it's inadequate, but it's like pretty good. And there have been like some major successes from it. We got lead out of gasoline. There's a lot less smog than there used to be. There are core programs like these are some of the criteria air pollutants. These are like the well-known widespread air pollutants that the Clean Air Act has like drastically reduced. This is from 1990 till approximately today. So it does work. Way too many words on this slide, but it's basically like the Clean Air Act established a bunch of programs and established this regime or this concept that like we need to permit air pollution. If all these facilities have permits, then they have monitoring. We can, over the course of years, ratchet down their limits, and that's essentially how we succeed with reducing air pollution. The other thing that I love, and I could talk about all day, but I won't for your sake, is citizen suits. In these federal laws, the people who wrote them back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, understood that polluting industries are not going to police themselves. You have to provide for citizen advocacy so that residents who live in communities that are impacted by pollution can bring their own lawsuits. And usually they do this through organizations that they're members of. So you join an organization, Center for Biological Diversity or something like that, then they sue the polluter on your behalf. The cool thing about the federal statutes is that they can get their legal fees covered. So then the community members don't have to raise all that money. They often also result in grant funds that benefit the communities that are polluted. So yeah, permits are crucial to the Clean Air Act. They're kind of the backbone. The proof is in the permit, as they say. Title V permits, which I have if you go to the Bay Area Air District page, you can see all of the major air pollution permits that are in our region. These are required under the Clean Air Act, and they have all the pollution limits. They're unique to each facility, and they all come up every 5 years. So there's an opportunity to like impact what will be in the next permit every 5 years. This I have in here just because it's relevant like right now. There were some enforcement actions. The Air District against 2 of our local refineries, Chevron and Martinez Refining Company, which is our big local dirty dog. It's always sending pollution into our communities. Their limits are going way down. Effective in July, they've had to install new equipment, so hopefully that'll be a positive outcome for our area, but it's something to keep an eye on.
Good. That was that happened to install the pollution reduction equipment because of community activity. You know, people getting together, showing up at various different air district meetings. You know, so that took a number of years and a lot of activity. You know, from the community, but it did pay off. You know, it's been a while since that rule was passed, but finally they're being forced to produce the pollution reduction equipment.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like the Air District, they're the ones that took action, but only because people kept complaining to them about these specific refineries, constantly violating their permits. And the Air District will do some enforcement. They'll slap them with fines. They'll go in and do inspections. Sometimes they won't give them advance notice of an inspection. But this was a bigger deal, and actually it was a big enough deal that when the Air District took action, both of the refineries sued the Air District to try to stop it. But they were stupid lawsuits, and they ended up settling, and the Air District basically won through the settlements and got a lot of money for the communities and stuck to their guns about needing new pollution.
But the money that they received, did they do anything in the community to fix it?
There are funds that have been, and I'm not sure how to access them, but yes, there's like 138 million penalties and payments, and then there's funds that are directly for the communities. Yeah,
Okay.
say more about that.
Yeah, okay, currently because I'm on the Community Advisory Council within the Air District, so I kind of know what's going on here within our Air District. So to answer your question, I think in the past from last year, so basically we voted on a resolution which the penalty fund, I think 80% of the penalty fund is going to the community which get impacted. The other 20%, okay, this is a kind of a very general statement, there are some detail. Okay, so 80% is go to the community get impacted and 20% goes to administration and all that, but to the air district. So yes, there are going to be funding available. I think this Chevron is one of the major penalty, and the other one is the one in Venetia. Okay, so
Valero.
Valero there. So there will be funding available, and I think it's available for us to apply. So basically, if you have some project you want to pursue, we can definitely talk about that. So of course, this is after we finish this training this year. But as we said to all of you, like, okay, if after you finish this 1 year and you want to continue, for sure we can work with you.
Yeah, much to do, as I mentioned.
Yeah,
Always
and-
something to do.
I'm sorry. And also, I think Bay Area is actually the first air district which actually made this decision to give the penalty fund to the community. I don't think, like, for example, Los Angeles is not doing that. So just to answer your question, yes, when we get the penalty from the polluter, a large part of the money is going to come back to the community.
But what do it do in the community?
That's what we are going to come in and say, okay, we wanted to do this or we want to do that.
It's up to us. It usually goes through community organizations, like nonprofits or other community-based organizations apply, like, basically as a grant and say, here's a project we want to do and here's how much money we need to do it. And then I suppose the air district in this case will consider and figure out which projects to support. So yeah, and that's how it works with citizen suits too. There's often a pot of money that's like, we have a project right now doing some water monitoring with my organization that Chris has been helping out with. That we got through a different organization sued over water pollution in this area. And so then that lawsuit created a pot of money that a community-based organization can apply for a grant through. So that's another instance where you have to, like, know where to look for to make a proposal. But hopefully the air district will do some outreach on that. Generally, I just wanted to talk about, like, you know, we discussed the structures, the rules that we might be engaging with in a community advocacy campaign when something comes up and you want to fight it or you want to have some input. But then, like, how do you actually build the campaign? How do you go about it? This slide I just added yesterday because I was talking with Ken about the recent campaign at Crown Hill Materials on Broadway here in Vallejo. There were some community meetings. People have been telling the Bay Area Air District for years, like, there's a problem with the cement dust in our area. But they really needed someone to be, like, loud and, like, not letting it go. And so Ken and I were talking about that, like, different people have different styles or different things, like different ways that you might feel comfortable engaging with an issue. Some of us might have several of these, right? Like, I identify more with, like, resist, build, reform. But we need everybody to be involved and bring, like, our own strengths and aptitudes to this kind of, like, community grassroots campaign effort. So I like this slide because it's like a reminder of, like, all the different ways you can get involved. Not everyone needs to be writing letters all the time. Not everyone is going to go to the city council meetings every month or whatever. So we can go our own way and all, like, contribute to the greater thing.
That's a nice slide.
Yeah. It's not mine. It's from Soul Fire Farm.
Okay.
So yeah, I found it on the internet. But yeah, I liked it too. So when something comes up and you're like, oh no, this is a horrible project, this is complete BS, we have to do something about it, it's helpful to, like, really think about exactly what you're trying to achieve, who's involved, very specifically, like, what is even possible in this campaign? Like, how can we possibly have an impact on this? Can we stop it? Is that possible, or can we just have some input over it? So getting clear on all these things, the who, what, when, where, why, how, is like really important for successful campaigns and coalition planning. And being really specific about it, like who do you need to contact, who's the lead agency. You don't just want to be screaming into the void on Facebook. I mean, you can if that makes you feel better, but it's probably not going to like impact the outcome of one of these campaigns. So getting organized in this way, I think, can be as simple as answering these basic questions, and then being as specific as possible. I have a couple slides emphasizing like being really clear about campaign goals. People don't have infinite attention or time, so like thinking about, maybe you have a core group of people that are going to be like really involved for the long haul, going through the EIR, picking it apart, giving that technical feedback. But then you have like 100 people who are willing to take 5 minutes and like write a postcard, or willing to take an hour and show up to a meeting. So thinking about different things that different people can do based on their availability and their interests, and then maybe also their strengths, like their advocacy style, is also really smart when you're putting together a campaign. This is a lot related to the who. So like, ultimately, who's the decision maker? Is it an agency? Do you need to influence one of your council members? And then think about like, who has influence on them? They might listen to you as a community member, hopefully, but you might be able to influence them through different networks. So this can be like a whiteboard activity where you're figuring out like, how is this person I'm trying to get to do something, the decision maker, what's their network? Like, who's gonna influence them the most? Like, is it their church community? Is it like family members or something that you might know? Maybe they have business associates that you might be able to influence to like talk to them. I mean, we are social creatures, we're great apes. So like this kind of strategy can really work. And it's something to like think about. This is also not my slide. I left this in from the first year ambassador program that I was in your chair for, I was a student for. Marcus Griswold did the advocacy presentation that year. And I just think, I guess I did add the free food part to it. But I really like this part about like, be realistic about what people are going to remember when you're just talking to them. And think about ways to like engage. So you're encouraging folks to discover things for themselves. You're doing something educational, or just like repeating information so people are not just hearing it, but they're seeing it in their community. Maybe they see a poster and then they go to a talk too. So thinking about different ways to get your message out, and different ways to involve people. And then, yeah, just some like tips around like thinking about what you're saying and how different audiences will respond to it. Make your events fun and give people food. It makes them happy. More on the who, like I said about screaming into the void on Facebook. Like if you're gonna do that, maybe you're not directing your message at someone who totally disagrees with you and has no influence, is not gonna be involved with the issue anyway. Like don't waste your time. Think about like who you're actually trying to convince. If there's someone that's already with you, then you don't have to worry about them either. You're trying to like convince people in the middle who might be interested, might not know about the issue, and then might actually have some influence over the outcome. So you're always looking for people who are influential, and who might not take action if you're not like actually reaching out to them. You don't need to worry about everyone that already agrees with you, and you don't really need to worry about people that disagree with you but aren't going to do anything anyway. So think about targeting too. And then this is straight in Citizen Air Monitoring Network's wheelhouse. If you have data, it can be very compelling. It's hard to change people's opinions even with data, but if you use like relevant, unassailable, like just numbers about like here's what our pollution monitoring says, it can be very convincing, especially in these governmental settings. Jasmine's gonna talk more about Screen later, but these are some examples of like official governmental data sources that you can reference that will be more compelling if you're trying to convince the government agency to do something or listen to your point. If you can support your point through these official sources, then it's gonna be more compelling. And then yeah, back on messaging. This is a mashup of one of Marcus's old slides too. It's just like worth taking time to think about, like, what are you saying? How are you saying it? What are you really asking people to do? You don't just want to get people to get like angry.
Yeah.
Maybe you do just need them to show up to meetings and get their input. Maybe you need them to do something more specific. So being clear on your goals will go a long way towards a successful campaign. I put this picture in from Mom's Clean Air Force. I think they're really good messengers. It's really hard to argue with like moms fighting for clean air for their kids. Like everyone has a mom, and yeah, like they're a national network of organizers, and they do all kinds of things. This is also a Mom's Clean Air Clean Air Network person, so they're pretty good at identifying like ramping up and ramping down as needed when something's happening legislatively. Then they'll like start talking a lot about it online and engaging their followers with whatever issue it is. They're like, if it's a new regulation that has to do with air pollution nationwide, then they'll work on it. Decision points also include like all these permitting milestones we were talking about earlier. Like when something happens and you have 30 days, 15 days, 60 days, then that's when you need to like mobilize your campaign, your community. Just more about public comments. I'm sure, has anyone like gone to city council meetings or other where you have like a time limited? I'm sure you have, Charlie. It's often like 2 or 3 minutes where you can stand and say what you want to say. Public comments in these in-person settings, they're almost always time limited. So one good way to like make more of an impact with your comments is to coordinate with other people. Maybe you have 5 points to make, and you only have 2 minutes each. So like make sure that each person is making a different point. So you're getting it all in and being more effective with the limited time. You just got to know the rules before you go in. Like how long am I going to have to speak? And making them personal really helps too. I see a lot of campaigns that are like sign this change.org petition, and that's fine. Or like send this postcard to your representative. It's not meaningless, but it makes a much bigger impact if you write your own letter in your own words. And in these settings, especially like in these permitting settings where they have to respond to each and every comment, if you send identical comments, you're only going to get one response to all those comments. But if you send different ones, if you make them personal, not only are they more impactful because they're more personal, but then you get more responses. Like they have to respond to the individual concerns, not just like the one talking point that everyone's sending in.
So everything does get read, it does get responded to, and you feel it does make a difference if it's more personal.
Yes, yes. I mean, you can, we just had an instance, it was kind of funny yesterday, there was something published. We sued the EPA because there were a bunch of overdue state implementation plan submittals for the Clean Air Act. Each of the states has to say, here's how we're going to implement the Clean Air Act. And then the EPA has to approve that for all of the different pollutants and programs. So they were missing all these deadlines. We had a case against the EPA. And as a result of it, they published this new rulemaking, right? And in the published rulemaking, they said, here's what we're going to do with the rule. The state is going to submit by X date. We received 4 comments. 3 of them were from environmental groups, and we're going to deal with those through a different thing because they're not really relevant. One person commented that they thought cannabis should be considered as an air pollutant and regulated as a toxic substance. So this is in the like Federal Register that the EPA published that, and they said we received this comment. We don't think it's germane, so we're not going to address it here. Like they respond to each and every one. They might not make a difference if you're just complaining about cannabis smoke. But like, if you're complaining about something relevant, then they might actually influence the outcome. So yeah, they do by statute have to respond to each and every comment,
So smoke's not relevant to whatever.
to that specific rulemaking. Yeah.
Some cannabis smoke smell good.
They were looking at industrial sectors of pollution, so yeah, it wasn't relevant.
That wasn't right, got it.
Right.
I've done technical comments before where the response was like kind of disregarding my comments and being highly inaccurate on their part. However, when you do your comments, whether they're technical or otherwise, sometimes if there's a lawsuit coming later on, the lawsuit can actually use your comments as part of their lawsuit. So it's sometimes, however you do it personally or technically or whatever, it's important to put these comments in because it very well might be the handle that the lawyer on your side will be able to kind of challenge the agency or the company doing that.
Yeah,
So
you're creating a
important.
record. Yeah,
You're
So it does
public
matter.
record.
totally. And if the agency is like totally sucking and not responding to the community, then yeah, to the community comments, right? Like they just skip through that step or they do it in some really cursory way, then there could be a lawsuit later to overturn their decision because they missed that step.
So your
So-
opinion's important.
Yeah, every little requirement can be a hook for future legal advocacy. I mean, getting there is not necessarily simple and it might be expensive to hire the people to actually do that for you, but it might not be. Like you might just be able to find a community lawyer to do it for you. So yeah, every step really matters. Yeah, and this is my last slide. So I add to this every year, just thinking about like different considerations and strategies. And I live in Vallejo, and I know not everyone here does, but just like, you know, some local places to show up or post stuff that would matter in our community. Any other ideas to add to this slide would be most welcome.
A library.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have like posting signs around town, but does the library do like communication? Like,
They have their own events, so yeah, probably work with them on events and yeah, signs and
yeah, for sure. And some of these, I think, I think maybe Daphne's considering a film, like a visual storytelling project for the project phase, but yeah, just like ideas in the mix for projects for this program or future programs. There have been filmmaking and storytelling projects in the past too, so yeah, all advocacy strategies, going back to that butterfly slide, it's like we all kind of have our different approaches and our different styles to stand up for the community, so all are welcome and all are helpful. And then that's my contact information, if anyone wants to reach out anytime, I'm always here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. A couple things.
For the lunch,
So before I talk about lunch, I wanted to tell you that I think we've probably mentioned before that we want to do individual Zoom meetings with each of you individually, alone, by yourself. And that's so that Jasmine and Ken and I can get to know you and what you're really into and how we can support, you know, your passions, and then also help you make sure that your passion can come into fulfillment in an air quality project. And so when we do that, we always learn a lot about you and we really enjoy it, and we can help you really focus more on your project too. So they take about half an hour. I made a sign-up sheet and it's on the little side table right here. So if you can today look at your schedule and sign up for a slot, that would be swell. You also get first crack at it that way. And then I'll send you an invitation with a Zoom link so that for the meeting once we get you signed up.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, again, my name's Jasmine, still Jasmine in 2026. I did change my last name though, so it's now Aubrey.
Go ahead. Congratulations.
Thank you. Just a little bit about me for background on this training. I do have a master's in public health, and I am certified in public health as well. And in graduate school, I actually had the great opportunity to study under Dr. Trina Mackey, who was here last time, where we looked at environmental justice as a pillar of public health. And also during my graduate studies, I also worked for the San Francisco chapter of NRDC, which is known as the Natural Resources Defense Council. It's one of the leading environmental advocacy organizations in the country and worldwide, where I had the unique opportunity to work on a handful of environmental justice initiatives during my short time there, so that was great. And then, yeah, again, I'm currently a senior health education specialist here at our Solano County Public Health Department. Everything I say today, though, I'm representing myself in the collective, so I'm not speaking on behalf of the county today. Okay, I have to make sure I always say that. So, again, that's my background, and I say all of this just to say the lens of which I'm going to bring environmental justice to you today and how we're going to dissect it. It's mainly going to be through the public health lens that I have expertise in, and the reason why we look at it more through a public health lens, because it's not just environmentalism or things like that, but public health looks at the macro level of health. So meaning we aren't looking at individual choices that a person is making to affect their health outcomes. We are zooming out and looking at our structures. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, great. We can move on to the next slide. Oh, okay, well, we talked a lot about this, but I like to just jump in and start these trainings as to why are we here talking about environmental justice anyway, and what that means to me. So, Annie already gave a thorough background about the Orson cement plant, so I won't go into much more detail on that, but I wanted to put this example for Vallejo, not just because it happened in Vallejo, but because it has many of the key elements of environmental justice that we'll go in depth on. And something that does stand out about this recent example, which is oftentimes not the case, is that we as a community were able to stop this proposal, this injustice before, the actual injustice occurs. So we are very lucky because most of the time it does not end up this way with this outcome, which is why we have this field of environmental justice. And then another point I was just going to make on this was even after, we are successful and things like that, there's still some level of injustice that tends to occur. Sadly, so that's also why I had put up the Vallejo Times Herald article here. This was in 2021, and it talks about how the former Orson cement plant, which is now called BMT, how they were still operating even after all the fight. They were told to get out, and they were doing so past this point in 2019 without permits in Vallejo. And they made the press because Orson officials were found guilty of multiple attempts to bribe San Francisco policymakers who had decision-making influence here in Vallejo to keep the plant operating. This is real. So, yeah, it's happening. It's not a movie. It's happening in our town. So, I talk about this example to just show that environmental justice is relevant and timely and important here.
I have a question.
Yes.
What agency were people being targeted for bribes?
These are just San Francisco lawmakers. I don't think the article goes into the exact names.
Oh, okay.
Yes. But yeah, I'm sure there's some investigative journalism on that. So.
I think it's public work or garbage or something in that area.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Do
Sorry,
they
that
take
you meant like
bribes?
the actual policymakers here. Okay, next slide. This slide was also to just show that Rodeo has a stake in this conversation too. So we know Rodeo faces similar challenges, and they have similar demographics and characteristics to Vallejo as well. And as a refinery community and heavily industrial town, Rodeo is in the top 25% of communities with the highest level of pollution exposures in the state. So we talked a little bit about that this morning. And something also unique about the city of Rodeo is how its industrial zoning is embedded directly next to its residential neighborhoods, which we could probably see a house somewhere right there. So we'll talk about that. But these land use decisions were often made decades ago before environmental justice frameworks existed, but their impacts still persist today, and that's what we see. So in today's training, I just invite you all to just imagine and re-envision a city, a Vallejo, a Rodeo, where we lived in that did have environmental considerations and protections already embedded in its land use planning, and where no community has to share more pollution or be overly burdened than another. And so that's the concept of environmental justice. Okay, so that's my opener. And now we can actually start with the training. So in our past trainings, we focused heavily on a lot of science in this class, right? So we were breaking down health impacts, monitoring techniques, and going over technical data about air pollution. But I like to teach environmental justice more through as a lens through which we apply that science that we've learned throughout the course, right? So one that helps us better understand who is most impacted by air pollution, why these differences exist, and how we can address them. So this training will give us a clear understanding of what environmental justice is, how we can spot environmental injustice, and then how that applies to California. You can go to the next slide. So let's dive in. Next slide. Okay, so before I start this video, I'm just curious, has anyone in the room ever heard about environmental justice before today? Anybody? Okay, and then for those with your hands up, can we keep our hands up? And I just want to ask, with your thumb, can you indicate your level of familiarity and comfortability with the topic? So thumbs down meaning I don't know much about it. Thumbs up being I'm an expert, I can do this in my sleep. Okay, so we have a good mix in the room. Nice. So great, we'll play this brief video. For some of you, it's going to serve as an introduction, and for others, it will be a brief refresher. So Ken, if we can play it. And it's about 2 to 3 minutes, so it is brief.
Okay, so this is a city. Here are all the people living in it. People of all different colors, ages, wealths, and incomes. Except they don't all live together in the same place. They're separated into different parts of the city by what color they are, what language they speak, and how much money they have. And those different parts of the city look quite different. The parts that are whiter and wealthier tend to have green spaces, grocery stores with nutritious organic food, and of course the money to buy it, and are often far away from pollution-emitting freeways. The parts that are poorer and more diverse tend to have industrial sites, heavy-duty diesel-polluted ports and highways, and hazardous waste. All things that the city relies on to run properly, but that heavily pollute the air and water. And even if they have those grocery stores with nutritious organic food, most residents there couldn't afford it anyway. How did this happen? Well, this segregation can be traced back to race-based zoning and housing policies, but it wasn't always as deliberate as plain old racism. Some separations can simply be traced to poor land use planning. And as a result, these residents of the same city live very different lives. Say the city realizes it has an emissions problem. It comes up with a plan to reduce air pollution, plant more trees to suck up the carbon, or start a cap and trade program. But those trees get planted in the neighborhoods that are already green, and the factories that are spewing toxins into the air just buy more carbon offsets and keep spewing their toxins. The benefits of these programs are enjoyed by the communities that are already doing just fine, and the communities that were hurting most from all that air pollution, well, they're still hurting. This isn't just an imaginary city, this is the story of real cities all across the US where people might live in the very same area code, but their race, ethnicity, or wealth and income bracket causes them to experience wildly different quality of air, water, and life. In fact, it can even mean that they also experience different deaths. That's how serious this stuff is. This kind of inequity expands far beyond cities, too. Rural areas are full of commercially valuable resources like oil and coal, and they're also home to indigenous and low-income communities. But when those resources are extracted, those communities don't see any of the money, and they end up with all the air and water contamination that's left over from the extraction. And we even see this injustice on a global level, like in small island nations that are forced to directly confront the consequences of rising sea levels, but haven't played any significant role in the industries that are causing climate change. These peoples are sometimes forced to flee their homes because their land is literally going underwater. But the very states that did play a hand in creating climate change don't have migration policies to accommodate them. So when we talk about environmental justice, we're talking about how we can try to break down and reimagine a system that's built up on these inequities. A system where those who are already disadvantaged because of their race and economic status are made poor because they're unable to profit from the resources that the world depends on and are made sick or worse by the environmental contamination that comes with extracting those resources. Social inequities are intimately tied to the environment. That's why social justice is an environmental issue too.
Okay, so we're gonna break all of that down throughout the training, but that's environmental justice neatly packaged in 3 minutes. I'm going to move us along throughout the training because we do have a lot to unpack. But we will discuss further and have time to talk about these in length as a group and stuff. All right, so, it looks like we're on the next slide. So here is the common definition of environmental justice, and as well as how the EPA formally defines it. But essentially, environmental justice is the idea that communities shouldn't be forced to deal with more pollution because they belong to a certain race, national origin, or income bracket. And what's important to know is environmental justice will be achieved when everyone has the same protection from environmental harm and has equal access to the decision-making process to address environmental concerns that affect their health. So that's the idea there. And we can move on to the next slide. And EJ covers a broad range of aspects that affect our lives, and under the umbrella of environmental justice are just a few of the following topics here. But we are focusing on air pollution today, but I bring this up and I show you for examples just to get our gears thinking of how all of these topics are interconnected, right? So if we don't have clean air, then that's going to affect our ability to have clean water. And if we don't have clean water, then that affects our soil and our food and, the whole chain going that way as well. So there's that aspect, but also when we're talking about people, many communities face multiple problems, multiple of these exposures at once. So dirty air, unsafe water, and fewer resources. So for example, a resident can be drinking lead-contaminated tap water and then go to school every day next to a coal plant and get more exposure like that, right? So when these stack together, all these exposures and risks are the risk for negative health outcomes increase, right? And this is what we call cumulative impact, and you're gonna hear that word multiple times today. All right.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Because I learned some vocabulary today from Anna. Why is it that, considering we know certain areas, why is it that we know in certain areas where it is very bad, like for instance South Lake, why is it that clean air never, like with city council people being, living in that area or stuff like that, why is it that was never been a city, or a class like clean air to set up like a place in that particular area where people that live there could come out to just afford it. I don't know. They do know, because we know it's a very low income, poor like area, but it's like there's nothing to be done to help them, because they don't. We'll take meetings everywhere, but we never take a meeting to the center of where things are. We know Vallejo is the center of where things are to an extent, but I just wonder why,
Well, there's a lot of layers with that question, but we have, even with the Orson cement thing, so something really large scale, and we already know these things, we are taking it to the people that are policymakers that are supposed to be changing this stuff. We do know that all of the vulnerabilities Vallejo has, the air pollution, all these kind of stuff. It's like the people in power, they're aware too. And the reason why it's not happening is a lot of politics involved, but also it goes back to community power too as well. So for us to be able to gather, and that's something we're working toward. But hopefully it's something that we can change, because it does make a difference too. But it's not going to come from the top down. We are now making laws where we are making the top more accountable. But really, if it's not coming from the community up, there's nothing to close that loop. And with the enforcement, but yeah, that's great. Let's keep envisioning what our towns could look like if environmental justice frameworks were into our land use planning. Okay.
But the people that live in those communities don't know anything about nothing we're talking about. They don't know jack. So how are they supposed to know? Nobody tells them nothing. And all they do is get sick because they don't know that they need to go see this person or to speak up and do this. They don't know nothing. They just in the poor area getting sick. All the spew is in that area. Nobody's caring about what they're breathing and what they're drinking. And nobody cares. How are they supposed to know to talk about it?
And we're gonna
if they don't know.
And we're gonna talk about all the reasons why, like this is set up by design, and that's why it can happen here in our towns when there's not power. And we're going to talk about
Money.
how factories, that they need to be placed somewhere, right? And we want to make this as easy as possible. So if they're going to choose a wealthy community that has power, they don't want this, things like that. They have a more oversight. Or are we going to choose a community where there's no power there, so even if we place it here, there's nothing they can do about it? And all those kind of things. So that is what environmental justice is. We're going to talk about it. I'm going to keep us on track because we are tight on time, and we do have activities for discussion, and I don't want to shorten it. But great. Keep those thoughts going. Okay, so this was going to be more of a discussion building on cumulative impact, and I thought this example was a pretty cool update in the literature this year. Well, I guess in summer 2025. So I'm saying this year. But it reminded me of drawing parallels from Dr. Mackey's presentation last month about how air pollution showed a correlation to diseases like diabetes and things that we wouldn't automatically think about. And we're not talking about diabetes in this specific study, but this chart comes from a peer-reviewed article published in JACC Advances, which is a medical journal focused on cardiovascular heart health. And again, this was published in 2025 by a team of doctors and PhDs from several medical universities in the country, involved in clinical research as well. And this one in particular is a review study, meaning that it pulls together findings from a robust list of previous studies rather than just relying on one data set. And the study looked at how environmental conditions like pollution, heat, neighborhood infrastructure, how that affects heart health, if it even did, right? And it also asks whether some communities are exposed to more environmental risks than others and how that shows up in health outcomes. So in terms of findings, it showed that air pollution, heat, and toxins do in fact act as a modifiable cardiovascular risk agent. And especially, this was also seen especially in underserved and racially marginalized communities too. So there were differences. And they also focused on recommendations advocating for clinicians to integrate environmental exposure into cardiovascular, so CVD risk assessments and prevention strategies. So there is hope for us in the future for things like that. But going back to the discussion about cumulative risk, this chart depicts that while also linking disparities in our environment to differences in cardiovascular health outcomes, right? So some examples is having disproportionate occupational impacts in traffic density that leads to differences in health outcomes, uneven distribution of environmental policies or requirements for transparent reporting, tracking, evaluation, or enforcement, unequal access to clean technology, green spaces, and exposure to fine particulate matter. That's the PM 2.5 that we talked about in our last training. Also ozone, there are differences there, and diesel particulate matter emissions. And then other aspects too, like less public revenue from property and sales taxes. So looking at a wide variety of these things and how these can modify our risks. Yeah, we can move on to the next slide. So it's a vicious cycle that compounds vulnerabilities and risks that are not shared equitably. And that's why I bring up this slide so we can talk more about a lot of the terms that we've been talking about the last 20 minutes. So some of you may be familiar with this concept, while for others it may be new.
Yeah.
But I want us to look at all 4 images and just do a group share out. So this is where we'll have discussion. I want you guys to just share out anything that immediately stands out to you about these 4 images. So I'll pose this question, just simply, what differences do you immediately see when looking at and comparing these 4 images? You can just shout out anything.
The little girl in the ditch.
The little girl in the ditch, okay, this one, yeah, that's a difference. Anything
The
else?
equity of everybody's level.
Equity, everyone can see.
There's no wall in the last one.
There's no
Ah.
wall in the last one.
Justice.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Equality is uneven in the second one.
What do you mean by uneven? You're right, but can you expand more?
Well, the little girl is down low, she can't even see. Yeah, the fence is really high. And then the other one is just barely, and he's taller, so he's getting it all.
Mm-hmm. This one, yeah.
You getting it all.
He's fine, right? Great observation. And I'm gonna build off of that into another question. So thinking about all of these images together, what do we think they tell us about fairness, access, and justice?
Some people need more than others to.
And the reality is, there's a big injustice, the true reality.
Yes,
The
yes.
reality also is that it's solvable.
Solvable, say more.
That if people work together,
Mhm.
all races, all wealth, it can become even. It's sort of socialistic, but which I really like.
But until then, number two, that's how it's gonna stay. Just like that. Until all of us come together and talk about it and know about it. The equality is gonna stay just like that.
Yes.
It's not gonna change.
Yes, and
It's
you're
not gonna
all
become
right.
justice toward the end.
Yeah, so just what Elizabeth
Yes.
was saying. Is
It's
we
not gonna
can
become
solve
that,
this,
right. Right.
All right, so just to dive a little deeper into that, how do the images show different ways of addressing the barriers or each problem? We've touched on it a little bit, but I do want to go
Move stuff around. Move the stuff around.
Move
The
this
boxes around so everybody has the same redistribution.
Right. Okay. So reallocating resources and how that's partitioned out. Okay.
Because in reality, that little girl, she just knew. She ain't get nothing.
Yeah. Let's talk about each box one at a time. So let's just stay on reality. How is this addressing barriers? Is it addressing barriers?
It's unfair, for one.
She don't know.
Okay.
She knows.
And it's unfair that he got all them boxes and no one else he could see.
Yeah.
And she's dug in a hole.
So
Well,
for
the
just
reality,
She knows she can't.
the reality is that you're gonna have unequal. You know, it's gonna be unequal.
today, that is the reality of what we're living in.
And I see it in the future because of the lawmakers, you know, Congress, government. It's going to be
President.
like that. You know, we're going to always have this socio-economic thing. We're always going to
President.
have racism until people get the mindset that, you know, God created everybody equal.
And
It doesn't
everything.
matter what color you are. And each person should have the same rights.
Right. Okay.
Money.
We have a hand over here.
Money.
I think something I noticed is that there's always going to be a big guy and a middle guy underneath.
And a small guy.
Yes.
Good
Yes.
job.
Thank you.
You're always going to need people who are going to be working in the factories to
Right.
produce the food that you make and the furniture and all that stuff. And you're going to need the corporate heads to navigate the business. And I think that's how the world will always work, right? But there's ways like incorporating justice to make it livable for everyone.
Right. Okay. And I think that sums it up really nicely. So essentially, what Chris is also talking about is these hierarchical structures that we are living in. Where you have top, people are they are benefiting more than others, and then sometimes, many times, it leads to exploitation, right? So just to sum up with the symbolism for reality, when we're talking about boxes, so key points for this: it shows different people of different heights trying to watch a game over a fence, but some can see while others are blocked. It represents how barriers like systemic inequities affect people differently, and we've all said that here. Okay, and then moving on to equality, everyone is being treated the same, right? So they all get the same size box, but not everyone has the same outcome. This slide speaks to how treating everyone the same doesn't always create fairness, because people start from different places and have different needs.
Right.
Where equality can often create inequity. So we see that. Do we all understand why treating people equal, treating people equally, that's the word, isn't always good? Okay, I just want to make sure everybody understood. And that's why I want to say in the past, the more recent, I guess it's a decade now, it's like, I'm thinking about like 2010, 2015. Time's going by fast, but we really have been migrating toward the word equity and steering away from equality now in our focuses. So I'm sure everyone hears that word a lot more in today. And equity is the concept of fairness where resources and support are given based on individual needs and to ensure everyone has the same and optimal opportunity to succeed. So unlike equality, it recognizes that people have different starting places and provides supports based on those differences to ensure fairness. And then my favorite, justice. Justice is creating a system where barriers, which we would call root causes, are eliminated altogether so that no one needs extra help to succeed to begin with. Let's just get rid of the problem, right? I do want to pose to you, maybe we'll take one or two responses, but why do you think sometimes it's easier to adjust support, which is equity, rather than completely removing the barriers, which is justice?
Wow.
First of all, the justice one has me confused. Is that supposed to be a field? Because the little girl still can't see.
Yes, you can.
It looks like
It's
a
like
fence.
Everyone can see.
Oh, no, this is like
It's
the,
like a lot. Like
yeah, if we look at it through an aerial view,
Oh,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
Everyone can see.
Yeah.
Okay,
This means you can't run over and like hug the
okay,
players.
okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, the barriers have, foundations that have been in place for, I guess, hundreds of years now, at least in this country. So it's a lot harder to, break those down, especially with how people interpret the Constitution and all that. While we can also give support, like I guess using the boxes as a symbol, like it's easier to move the boxes than to take down the whole fence.
It's easier to move the boxes than to take down the whole fence.
Injustice takes longer.
Yes. Well, it would be starting from scratch, essentially, almost. Not every time, but if we're already starting on the wrong foot and then
Right.
it's been centuries and centuries and we're building on a foundation that wasn't meant to work anyway, yes. And when as Chris said, it's easier to just support.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to ask the question, why was the barrier put there in the first place?
Yes.
Because that barrier may, to some extent, have been put there for protection
Mm-hmm.
in a way, it just didn't work out.
Yes.
The type of barrier didn't work out.
Yes, I think that's actually gonna take us to our next. That's a good bridge to our next slide, actually. Can we move on to the next one?
That's the questions. Yeah, those are questions that need to be asked.
Yeah.
There could be dogs out there running around.
And then before we play the video.
Example.
So yeah, Melanie makes a great point. We need to ask why these were put here to begin with. There is a function to it, and sometimes it's not always bad. Sometimes it's even meant to protect our health. So an example is zoning. And we're gonna talk a little bit about zoning without going into the weeds. I don't have time to talk about it today, and it would need to be more trainings in this, but it's not a perfect solution. There's a lot of times where perfect solutions don't exist, but we need to understand how zoning and redlining shaped where pollution was placed. Then it's hard to fully understand why neighborhoods still face environmental justice today and we don't. So we can play the video. It's very brief, again, 2 to 3 minutes.
Zoning is a way for communities to separate land by use or form. For example, an area could be dedicated to commercial or industrial use, or there could be a restriction on how many housing units can be built. Zoning shapes the places where we live, but it also shapes our lives. Local zoning regulations determine where we can find housing, schools, and parks, and who gets to use them. Policymakers initially created zoning codes to protect public health. For example, to stop residents from getting sick from living too close to factories. But from the start, zoning has separated more than just land uses. It has also separated people. In the early 20th century, many communities explicitly used zoning ordinances to racially segregate neighborhoods, effectively declaring that different skin colors were as incompatible as a family's home and a smokestack. By the late 20th century, civil rights legislation outlawed overt housing discrimination, but those explicit racial barriers were quickly replaced by subtler methods. Even today, exclusionary zoning policies that restrict lower cost or higher density housing limit racial and economic diversity and raise housing costs. By driving up housing costs, restrictive zoning can exclude people from equal access to public resources, like schools and parks, and leave lower income workers unable to afford housing close to available jobs. When regions are more economically and racially segregated, everyone loses. Local economies see slower growth, and residents of all races are less upwardly mobile. And finally, despite being created to protect public health, zoning often pushes multifamily buildings closer to highways in areas with higher concentrations of air pollutants. As a result, low-income people and people of color are more likely to live in places that can make them sick. It doesn't have to be this way. When done thoughtfully, zoning can connect people and places, not divide us. Communities across the United States are beginning to re-examine the role of zoning and change the restrictive zoning rules, opening neighborhoods to multifamily housing, walkable densities, and more. For more information and resources, and to find out what other communities are doing to improve their zoning policies, go to urban.org/zoning.
Alrighty, so a lot to unpack, but just some key takeaways, just to recap. Zoning determines what our environments look like and where we can put our homes, schools, parks, hazardous facilities, trash, and freeways. And policymakers originally made zoning laws to protect us and to stop us from getting sick, but so they did that by separating facilities from where we live, but then they did more than that, right? So they segregated people too. So that's called exclusionary zoning, and we have race-based zoning from that. So zoning and redlining go hand in hand, and it talks about how different neighborhoods are affected, and it's so that's how we got here today. And you know, even as we're making progress, you know, we still have a foundation, and a foundation that, you know, we didn't start from scratch from. So we're gonna see impact from that. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. The next slide.
Zoning is a way for communities to separate land by use or form. For example,
Can I add one thing while we're waiting on this
Yes,
slide?
please.
For those following the California Forever project, their current proposal is to amend the zoning of Suisun City. So that'll go to the voters, but it's relevant to this, like, it's a tool that developers and others will often use to their own ends. So it's something where the public needs to keep in mind.
Yes, so inclusionary zoning versus exclusionary zoning. Alright, we're on part 2. So we've defined environmental justice. Yeah, that's that button. Okay, on to part 2, we've defined environmental justice. Now let's take a deeper look of how to spot environmental injustice. Next slide, please. And to do that, we're going to talk about the underpinnings some more about how these fences got here, and then having an understanding of how this field came to be to begin with. So environmental justice didn't come out of nowhere. It actually grew out of the civil rights movement, and communities were speaking up because they noticed a pattern, and a pattern documented across the entire nation. And that pattern was that pollution sources and toxic waste sites kept being placed in the same kind of neighborhoods. And those neighborhoods were overwhelmingly communities of color. And that pattern is called environmental racism. And it's been well documented, and eventually it came to a tipping point. And that tipping point was Warren County, North Carolina. So in 1982, citizens protested the dumping of 6,000 truckloads of soil mixed with toxic PCB chemicals whole bunch of stuff in there in their community. And at the time, the government needed to get rid of all of this waste, and they decided that Warren County was a good place to create a landfill to dump it in. And the community was largely poor, with a population that was about 60% Black. And the residents here, you can see, they tried to fight back really hard. They made a coalition, and after 7 weeks of protests and 500 arrests later, the state still dumped more than 7,000 truckloads of contaminated soil into this community. Again, the injustices were already here. They were already established before this, but this was the fight that was credited for having sparked the environmental justice movement. And we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so that's a little bit about the history of where it started. And that was then, and what about up until now? So I want to briefly just go over what national research is saying about these patterns today. And since 1987, when the first study to address matters of race, class, and environmental issues on a national scale, which is called the Toxic Waste and Race in the United States report, when it had found, after examining census and facility data across the nation, that race was the most critical factor when looking at where hazardous facilities were located. Since then, the study has been produced, and these trends have been produced over and over again, and they've done the same studies years later, similar ones, different measurements, and we're leading to the same conclusions. And even decades later, with much more larger bodies of research, better data, and more sophisticated tools, the same pattern continues to exist. So for example, in 2021, the EPA analyzed many types of pollution exposure across the country, and after their findings, they came to a clear conclusion, and this is their statement. The inequities we report are a result of systemic racism. Over time, people of color and pollution have been pushed together, not just in a few cases, but for nearly all types of emissions. Okay? So this is something that's been consistent over time. We have large bodies of research, federal reviews, and peer-reviewed studies. And so we know this already, and it's been cited that on average, just over half of people living near toxic waste sites are people of color. And people of color have seen 95% of their claims against polluters denied by the EPA. And they're twice as likely to live without potable water, so drinking water, and modern sanitation, and they experience nearly 38% higher nitrogen dioxide exposure. So those are just examples when we look at reviewed studies over time. Let's see. So before the next slide, let's see, what else do I want to conclude on? I want to say that environmental justice is the response to environmental racism. And over time, the field has expanded to address other inequities outside of race too, including disability, income, immigration, status, language, and power access. So it started as an environmental racist movement and has now since broadened into environmental justice. Okay? You can move to the next slide. Okay, so we have some history and we have a clear example of Warren as an environmental justice community. I want to pause and talk about what environmental justice communities tend to look like. And for a while now, I put together this list of things that I look at that tends to help me spot it a lot easier. And this is by no means an exhaustive list, but there are some key common characteristics that come up time and time again. So I'll talk about those briefly. So first, these communities are often located close to pollution sources. So things like highways, our factories, ports, or hazardous waste facilities. And because of that, they experience higher health risks and complications like asthma, heart disease, and other chronic conditions. So if we're looking at data and we see that a place has 3 times the state average, higher than the state average for asthma, like Vallejo, that's not to say that it's an environmental justice community, but that is to serve as a huge marker to stop and pause and say if it could be and to investigate things like that. So that's definitely one to look at as a marker. The second one, these communities are often predominantly communities of color and low income. So we've talked about this at great length. It's not by chance. It's tied to housing, policies, zoning, and de-investment over time. And then third, residents frequently have to organize into grassroots coalitions or advocacy groups to raise awareness and demand accountability and push and push and push for policy changes. And we mentioned over here of like, why don't people know about this and things like that? Well, if they did know about it and they had the power, they wouldn't be an EJ community, essentially, right? So it's about power. And then fourth,
Excuse me. When you say power, you mean money. Who has the money?
Power, meaning money, but also influences, resources, the whole thing. Yes, money is a huge factor.
Yes.
So, which leads into with power. These communities often encounter systemic barriers that limit their access to participate in the decision-making process or hold polluters and regulatory agencies accountable as well. And then finally, there's often long-term underinvestment in essential environmental and health infrastructure, like air monitoring, clean energy, and like healthcare systems. And these factors make it more difficult to prevent harm or recover once the damage is already done.
Right.
So, yeah, these are some key characteristics of EJ communities. And all that to say, we aren't saying that only EJ communities are exposed to air pollution, right? Like all these communities at some point probably have, like Beverly Hills, you know, LA, things like that. And it's not to say that it's just for one reason, one single factor, or one kind of community. But it is to say that there are differences when that happens, right? So for more affluent communities, they often experience less exposure and have more resilience because they tend to have more political influence and financial resources to prevent new pollution sources from happening, or to push for the expensive cleanup when contamination is identified. And in contrast, environmental justice communities are more likely to be exposed to higher levels of pollution over longer periods of time with fewer resources and less power to address the problem. So that's the difference that we're talking about. So let's keep that in mind as we explore more recent examples of EJ communities in California in the next activity. We can move on to the next slide. So let's see how we're doing on time. Oh, perfect. We're right on the dot. I said let's be at this activity by 2:15 and it is 2:17. So with all the discussion and all. So this is the fun part. This is the interactive part. But essentially, I have printed out 3 examples. We also put them on the calendar invite of environmental justice communities and examples, or I should say environmental injustices in communities. All right, let's start with the Flint group. Who had Flint water crisis?
Over here.
All right, can somebody, and you guys can tag team, but can you guys just share out high-level summary, what it was about, what's important that you think we should know about it, or what surprised you?
Well, I know that in Flint, Michigan, in the poor areas where they took these chemicals, the water was terrible. Every chemical in the world was dumped into this river. Every chemical. And the people there got sick, lost their hair, just terrible pipes, corroded pipes, and you had to boil. Look at that water.
Yeah.
People had that to drink in, bathe in. Pitiful, they were sick.
It was full of lead.
Yes.
And they said that's the worst chemical for a child.
Yeah.
There was so many people that got sick and everything, and the gist of it is the most they did was give these people bottled water.
After going to court and winning the cases,
Yeah.
they went to door and gave them water. But the river caught a fire.
Yeah,
How water gonna catch a fire? Water.
River caught fire.
Water caught fire. You know it had to be terrible.
Chemicals.
And then it's, oh God.
Full of chemicals.
And it's 10 years. That was
That's not that
14.
long ago.
And it's still
working.
having percussions
Yeah.
from that thing. Look at their pipes. People had to, it wasn't nothing they could do about it. They're poor. They're uninformative. They don't know jack, like I said. They don't know nothing.
The river caught fire
2
twice.
times.
Yeah.
Look at that water.
Oh, it was twice?
Yes, twice.
Oh, I didn't catch
The
that.
river caught fire twice.
How water gonna catch fire? God,
Oh,
like,
well, let's talk about
Sort
it.
of looks
wet.
like an artery, doesn't it?
Right.
Thank you.
She did good. She can't stop.
Thank you for that high-level summary. You guys pulled out the important points. We'll say
Oh wait, I didn't tell you the most important part.
the most important.
What happened was they stopped giving them good water and went to a cheaper system.
That's why.
And that system is what contaminated
Yes.
their water.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, that's what happened.
Just to
Perfect.
give a friend
Yep,
of
that
someone how
was
it-
everything.
And it used, Flint, Michigan was
The only reason
a
they-
rich town.
She's
You
from
know,
there.
Cars. I still have a brother and a sister that lives there. And a lot of people have abandoned their homes because of their pipes were destroyed and messed up. But it used to be a rich state because cars were made for everything, And it was a matter of neglect and the people that were in authority that changed from one to the next. But I can just imagine they said that they had been using that river for dumping for, I'm exaggerating, millions of years, but for a long time before it was, people started to notice,
so when he caught a fire, didn't
Yeah.
nobody say, wow, how that happened? The water catch fire? Water?
Well, thank you to this group. I think that was everything I was going to pull out. The only thing I was going to say, there's 2 things I was going to add. Began in 2014, and they have celebrated their 10-year anniversary.
But they don't
it's
have
still.
clean air.
Sorry?
Oh, okay.
No, sorry, I couldn't hear you.
They celebrated clean air?
Not clean air.
Oh.
Like since the event and the cleanup, but there's
They
still.
still.
Even though they've cleaned up the water, they made progress
still not
in it.
clean.
There's still disparities. There's still impacts that they're seeing even today. And
Yes.
you talked about it a lot with even the piping in the house.
Right, that's what
like
it's
that.
all about. They can't afford to change the pipes.
Things like that. So, on interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next group, who will be XI Technologies. Great job, this group. All right, where's my XI Technologies group? Right here. We have a designated spokesperson, high-level summary, anything that shocks you.
So the summary, in a nutshell, XI Technologies had a battery recycling plant that would dispense toxic waste into the land. This is in East Los Angeles. It would dispense toxic waste, and the residents didn't know about it, and it kept going on, and it got to a point where, they were shut down, and the plant was shut down. The waste was still in the land.
From the batteries?
Yeah, from batteries. I think it was lead and arsenic. Yeah, lead and arsenic in the land, and it was just so much. Yeah, it was just so much that even after they were shut down, it's still causing issues. And the main issue with that is that it costs a lot of money to clean that up.
Oh my.
And who's gonna fund
The
that?
land?
Yeah. Who's gonna clean up the land, right? And one of my main takeaways, or the group's main takeaways, was in the second or the first article, or the first paragraph on the second page. And it says, across the country, companies have been able to take advantage of disenfranchised communities because of the impression or the reality that nobody's paying attention. And our main takeaway is that it's true, like, people aren't paying attention just because they're not educated about it. And if they are being educated about it, usually it's too late. Like in this XI technology, like the damage is already done. It takes a lot more money to get rid of it. And one of our insights that we had is we think it's important to incorporate these teachings into like early education. That's the reason why I'm here right now, right? I went to a good school that taught me about, a lot of injustices in the country. And it kind of led me in a direction of going down a rabbit hole. Like, I take interest in environmental justice, right? And the reason why I have it so early is because I was taught it in school. And right now in the country, it's very anti-intellectualism right now. And they want to stop teaching things like critical race theory, and they want to stop teaching things about slavery. But the thing is that a lot of those problems, they just evolved into things like this, like environmental injustice. And it's important to educate the kids, early, so that it doesn't snowball into a bigger problem in the future. Yeah, and that's what they're not doing, right? So I think if there's some sort of education reform to, make the youth knowledgeable on the impacts that companies like these are having on our land, that these problems would mitigate.
But can I ask you,
Yeah.
but in order for them to do that, don't they need some type of permits or permission, or they can just go and do what the heck they want to do?
Is this talking about the XI technology?
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
they were
dumping
doing
stuff.
it. They were doing it. The reason why the residents found out is because there's one resident who just kept getting the toxic waste notices that XI was like doing. They had violations, and they just kept having violations, and nothing was being done. California knew that they were dispensing waste into the neighborhoods, and nothing was being done, even though California knew.
They knew. They
knew.
did nothing.
Let's see.
Money.
Yeah, and just to add to that, in terms of how they knew, how did the residents find out, is because they were feeling symptoms and stuff to this, and they were having complaints all the way to, I think, like radiuses out of the city. So it was happening in the city of Vernon, and eventually the DTSC, Department of Toxic Substances Control, I think, they came in and they tested the soil in houses near the facility, and that's when they found all those high concentration of arsenic and lead and things like that. And then they got shut down. But the community didn't know, because this company, as they do, like Foursome, what happens is they come and they say, hey, we're an environmentally friendly business. And that's how they marketed themselves in the beginning. And so it's deception there.
Recycling.
Yeah.
Recycling.
Yeah. So that's why, and they get away with it, especially in certain communities. The only thing I was going to add is this was predominantly, I think like 70% Latino community and low income, right? So there's a lot of barriers already there.
Not knowing from a different country, not understanding English and all the high tech stuff that go on. they was winning.
And even when they do,
Yeah.
and even like here in Vallejo, when we do, we don't have the power.
No, none.
So you wanted to add
So
something?
is that where a lot of these unexplained fires can come from? Because everything, the chemicals is out in the soil and different areas of the world. LA had a
well,
big fire.
Like when it
I
gets
don't
too
keep up
hot.
with that, but let me speak. I forgot to speak on that. Was going to be my second thing for Flint. For the fires, let me go back. It wasn't millions of years that the river was having problems, but it was a whole century before 2014 when it started to. And the reason for that is because it had become a de facto dumping ground for industries. So they had like nearby car factories, meat packing plants, and mills that would just dump and dump and dump. And then the waterway would take runoff from the agriculture and urban areas, and it's just pollutants through like leaching landfills nearby. So this was just a chemical soup. And then I don't know if the article said that's why it caught on fire, but again, we have all the things that would spark a fire.
Well, they just didn't come out and say it, but it said it.
Okay, yes, but all that to say, like this was in, like this has, it didn't just get here when it gets attention. Oftentimes it's too late, things like that. Okay, I want to keep, we have one more group, and then there's a couple of other slides I want to, I'll breeze through them, so I can get you guys out of here on time. But this one is my favorite, and I actually discovered this one during my time at NRDC when I was doing environmental justice work. I wasn't involved in this, but they were just putting out news releases on this in 2020, as if the world didn't have enough going on in 2020. So can I have the Shingle Mountain group give a high-level summary?
Yeah, they're in South Dallas. It's primarily African American and the Latino community, and it's been a site of multiple landfills. Kind of dirty industrial processes historically. So it's been historically redlined. Black people started moving in there, like after the Civil War and everything. So it's been a historical place to do dumping. Like in this mountain, it's called Shingle Mountain. It's 60 feet high. Apparently, a couple of guys who were in the roofing business had this great idea, like, oh, let's do a recycling thing, so you could, grind up shingles and actually make tar stuff to fill in roads and stuff. So they were grinding this stuff up, and when you grind these big shingles and turn it into microscopic particle, all of a sudden it starts releasing like microscopic glass particles that are in the shingles and
What's a shingle?
Roof shingle.
But what do they make it from that make it a shingle?
Well, it's made from tar. It's like tar paper with gravel on top.
What the mountains got to do with it?
Well, these are old shingles.
That's the mountain.
So they were dumping old shingles there to get rid of them. So when you get a new roof, they have to do something with those the shingles from before.
Okay.
It's called a mountain. It's just a shingle, but
I get it.
I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. Yeah, so it's a big pile of shingles. So they start grinding this stuff up. It was like, it's, I don't know, 100 big trucks a day or something like that. And it's just going on and on and on and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And people were, complaining about it. Started with one person, one grandmother, who her little granddaughter was living with her. And so...
it's on their home.
Basically nobody did anything about it for years, and people complained about it. And, finally there was activity on it. Fill me in. Well,
just now there's a contract to start cleaning it up, and these guys started it in 2017. So she started complaining in 2018, I think, and just now they're getting around to
cleaning.
Well, there was a contract to get it done, so who knows what that means.
Go ahead.
Okay, the city sued the two guys, plus a third person who said, this is a really good idea, I'll do it too. And they were supposed to be fined $1,000 a day until it was cleaned up. It cost, I don't remember how much. And one of the guys just said, I'm declaring bankruptcy, I can't afford this, and walked away. No, never went to jail. Never had anything done to him except his bankruptcy. And so the city has to clean it up, which means the people have to clean it up. These guys don't go to jail.
And it was unpermitted, from the beginning. So they just started dumping it. So the city obviously knew about it and didn't do anything about it. And it's one of these situations where, that community is represented by people who don't really represent the community politically.
Right.
So they kind of get away with these things, and so when people complain about it, they're considered more of like a problem. They become the problem, for complaining about it, which everybody's heard about that kind of situation. You complain about injustice, and then you're the problem.
Right.
And
But that was, I thought, interesting, started by a guy who was a roofer, so he knew there was a problem that cost money and a lot of paperwork to do at the landfill, which was far away, to dump shingles legally. So he had picked out a spot in this area.
In this lady's back.
And where the low income, mostly black and Latino people, and people were doing everything out there. There are over 300 sites out there emitting toxic properties to the people. So they were like, hey. And so the truckers all came there and paid more than they would at the dump because they didn't have to do any paperwork or drive as far to dump their shingles.
Yeah, honestly, two men was just like, oh, I'm gonna litter here.
Yeah.
And then it just snowballed into a mountain of 70,000 tons. 70,000 tons. And
So
again,
what is
she was.
That's a good summary.
This is her house. She had complained for years, like she was having health symptoms, itchy skin, tight throat, itchy throat, and they didn't do anything. So she sued the city, and even after that, like a whole year, they still wouldn't pick up anything because again, it cost money. The last time I checked on this, which has been a couple of years, so I don't know where we are right now, but they had removed a lot of this, and
nothing was done for her.
no,
To
even
deal
when
with
she
all
won.
that.
Yeah. So, environmental justice, guys.
Environmental justice, injustice.
I'm gonna. I got a couple more slides to close this out. Before 3, it's about almost
So
2:55.
that whole mountain.
This is real.
Wow.
Again, what was happening in 2020. And that's not something we need to be dealing with.
And it feels so obvious.
it's just like a mountain of metal slag powder that they were going to do over at Orsum here in Vallejo, 60 feet high, blowing on top of people's houses. So,
And what is
same
it, the
thing.
Koch brothers have mountains of something that dust flows for miles. That's what Chicago is.
All right.
We the people. We the people.
Yeah.
A mountain of
Thank you all. You guys did a great job with high-level summaries and sharing that out with everybody. And I think we have a firm understanding of environmental justice communities, how they differ from other communities, because air is everywhere, but it doesn't mean that air pollution is distributed equally. We're gonna move on to the last parts of this presentation. Forgive me that I'm gonna be breezing through it a little bit, but we've covered most of this in Annie's presentation, so I'll just give some remaining thoughts. Let's see for the next slide. We're going to talk specifically about California. I think we all know this, where California is like the leading, a leader in trying to improve air pollution and have more stringent laws than the rest of the country. A lot of the states, they adopt from what we do first usually. But we also have some really profound pollution struggles here when compared to the nation. So there's a few reasons for that. Again, we are the most populous state. That's going to mean more pollution, more people, more cars, more emissions, things like that. And then what that does, those pollutants, it contributes to we have really high level, ground level ozone. So, Dr. Spada was talking about the one in the sky, and then the bad is on the ground. Yeah. That is here, California. And what's happening is the pollutants that are emitted from your diesel trucks that It's like the VOCs and things like that. It's mixing with our sun, our climate, things like that, and it's creating smog. And so that's why, especially places like LA, we have this problem like almost every day. And again, that's also because of California's geography, right? So California has a lot of like valleys and basins, so it traps the pollution in the air and it gets stuck and it's not able to be dispersed. We have agriculture, the fertilizers and pesticides. A lot of those have PM, particulate matter in it and other things like that that contribute to airborne pollution. We talk about wildfires. The thing also about wildfires is that it has high concentrations of that fine particulate matter that Dr. Mackey was talking about, that PM 2.5. It's made out of like soot, ash, things like that. Oh, black carbon, organic compounds that can travel long distances, especially with wildfires. So, and on top of that, you know, Ken and Annie, we went into the Clean Air Act, we went into depths about how we are only looking at this in a regional way. There's no enforcement to look at this, you know, in the community level, like what we're doing with this group, right? So one monitor for a region. Next slide.
I just want to apologize to the class for all this coughing.
Don't
All that stuff
apologize.
is ridiculous.
No, not at all. Not a bother, Ken. Okay. So we have all these problems, and then whose job is it to fix it? We've talked about this. This might have come up in every presentation, but if you leave with one thing, remember CARB. Then CARB. It's their job, and they oversee all of the local air districts who are going to, who's in charge of doing all the air monitoring and things like that for our like stationary resources and whatnot. Okay. Oop. Okay. Next slide. All right. Let me see how we're doing. Here, the idea was just to talk about what CARB does for environmental justice. So here's an example. Like in 2006, we had Assembly Bill, that's AB 32, and it required CARBs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 1990s levels. So to reduce that by the year 2020, that was established by the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee, and we did meet those goals. So that's just an example. But we have other laws. So California laws also direct funding to EJ communities through SB 535, Senate Bill 535. It creates a community air protection program, which is AB 617, and requires environmental justice to be addressed in local government planning, which is SB 1000. Okay, and we can go on to the next slide. We talked about rodeo, so we know that this is relevant especially to rodeo too. And when we're looking at the Cal Enviro screen here, because through SB 1000, rodeo is considered, and SB 535, rodeo is considered a disadvantaged community based on how they score. They're in the 81 to 90th percentile. And what the Cal Enviro screen does, by the way, it was made by OEHA, the EPA's OEHA. I wish Dr. Lily Wu was here because she works a lot on this. But it's a mapping tool. It has 12 indicators related to pollution burdens and 8 indicators that track population characteristics and vulnerabilities based on our census data. Rodeo is within the top 25% of all communities in California. They're the most impacted by the pollution and the most vulnerable. So there's 2 things we're looking at: pollution burden and vulnerability. And that's how you get these scores. So it's not top 25 towns, it's percentages, but they are in that for the ranking. All right, so I just wanted to bring that up. We already talked about AB 617. Next slide. Last thing I did want to say about this is, again, this is AB 617 is important because it's community level data that's being required in the throughout the process, right? So community involvement, and especially to our EJ communities, which are the yellow circles right here. The blue means the air districts that the funds are going to. 95% of the funding are going to the air districts, these three. I don't know where the other 5% are going. But you'll notice that some EJ communities, they are grouped together. So we see it's not just Richmond by itself. We have Richmond, some San Pablo, South Sacramento, Florence, things like that. And I say that because Vallejo by itself, Rodeo by itself, we're not an AB 617 community yet, but we can use a strategy of coming together to increase our odds of being an AB 617 community. So that was just one thing I was going to mention there. That's my last slide. Well, next slide. And then this I wasn't going to go into, but if you're more interested in what AB 617 mainly does, you can read the screen. But that's last slide. That's all I have for you guys right on. Yeah, with that. So I want to. Yes, and these will all be sent to you guys. But I want to just leave you guys with the question and just a reflection question of, now that we know all that we know, how can we as a group take action? And I think we're already doing that, even coming together as a community to be concerned and raise awareness and things like that. And, you know, just having concern for one another as well in our community. So I'd like to leave you with this thought question today, and we can brainstorm in our next meetings. All right. That was the last question. Sorry, I know it's 3:01. Yeah, it is 3:01. We won't do feedback. I'll gather feedback on our next training, but I did want to make sure you guys are aware that or not next training, but our next meeting. We will continue to meet. We're going to be meeting up until you guys graduate, which I believe is in May. We're not meeting, it's still going to be once a month. But we are going to be moving into phase 2 of this program, which is where we are now taking action to what we learn in your passion projects, okay? So we tend to meet, it's going to be the same time, second Saturdays.
At noon, usually we start at noon.
Yes, we start a little later, they're shorter. Thank you. Second Saturdays, we'll start at noon. I will send out calendar invites.